Welcome back to Senate Education. So, committee on S100, which we'll vote tomorrow. I did talk to Catherine Benham in Joint Fiscal. It does not look like we can lower it. She's been listening to our conversations from 29 to 20 because it's being done in the yield bill. So we have to stay at 29. We're talking about roughly 40 million for PCBs, and then I guess the remaining dollars would go toward would go back to taxpayers. I think that's the way finance is sort of thinking about things. Finance is looking for our thoughts on meals, as we know, and PCBs. They're quite clear where we are on PCBs, as is the corner office. I share everybody's concern that the first school that is tested could take $40 million. I mean, it's a very serious problem. One thing that we could, I believe, do, I thought I wrote this down somewhere, is put 40 million aside and then say any surplus funds, kind of try to put some fence around those, saying they also would have to go to PCB mitigation.
My understanding is that this 40 million, whatever it is for PCBs, don't necessarily all be shot at one school. I thought that this would really be to support with the consultants, the engineering, when the schools identify the issues, because if schools don't have those budgeted and they don't have that easy access to those resources, so this will have to come up with the capital funding, the bonding. But
this is assessment and mitigation funds, and the assessment piece is about 5 million. I mean, so to really assess all the schools, it's a serious issue, and it's and I was just telling the pro tem, you know, the meals thing, it is tricky for me. It really is, because I do genuinely worry that we are about to jump into hundreds of millions of dollars on school construction, getting kids out of schools. And to Mr. Young's point, and I thought it was a good point, if you don't have the spaces to prepare the meals to teach, that's certainly going to be a problem. But I'm reading the committee, again, I'm not asking for a vote, but with Ms. St. James, I'm reading the committee as using these, not everybody on the committee, but I'm reading that we should at least entertain a bill that would use the 29 million for meals. And I think there's also been conversation around sort of, and I don't know how you want to articulate the center lines, and if others agree, this sort of 3-year period, this 3 to 4 year period, if you will.
We could call it a pilot program.
Could call it a pilot program. Again, I don't know if our friends in finance will completely agree, but it certainly would send a message that we think that the program, people need to check in. We know that there are going to be competing expenses going forward with building construction, etc. So that is one way to think about it, center lines.
So I was also going to suggest that there be some, so the question is how the money is released and administered. So if it's going to go to individual school districts as the funding is needed, so there's going to have to be some accounting process that goes on. So and that would ensure then that any excess funds remain available. So that I don't know what the accounting process is. And then the other piece of it is maybe there's some kind of, I'm staring in the face because I'm trying to think. It's been a long time. But if there's some kind of joint fiscal committee, you know how we had the ARPA funds released?
Yes.
Some kind of either joint fiscal committee or other oversight on that, the use of the funds, release of the funds. We need to know that we're not spending more than is needed.
Right. Ms. St. James, how would that be done? In other words, how would the funds be distributed? How would we learn that, you know, as we heard from Hunger Free Vermont, it might come back to 17 million was spent. How would all that work?
So that would be Beth St. James Office of Legislative Counsel. That would all be done through AOE. The appropriation is to AOE, and there would be the statute or the session law as drafted in the House passed version have reimbursements happening quarterly. And I think you've heard testimony from Rosie Kruger from AOE that the school districts are actually submitting reimbursement requests much more often than quarterly, and those payments are going out more often than quarterly. But I think under statute, it's contemplated that at least quarterly payments are going out. But that would all be handled through AOE, and the bill as passed by the House does have a reporting requirement that asks for data on a school level and if possible on a grade level.
What bill?
Grade level expenditure,
What bill is that?
100.
I'm sorry, we're talking about S100, correct?
Yes, oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were
yeah.
talking about a different bill.
Nope.
Okay,
I was,
Oh,
Senator Purcell.
and maybe because I was reading the testimony on the PCBs, but I thought,
I thought you were talking about PCBs.
yeah, that's what I thought your comment was about. How is the funding for the PCBs gonna be?
And both of them are gonna have to be
Both of them
done
are gonna have to
somewhere.
And what I thought was happening on that, but I don't know if we're talking about meals. but-
We're really talking about meals right now. I feel like we've given our recommendation to finance on PCBs. I've not heard anything that would make me think other than we will end up with hopefully roughly $40 million for PCBs. I think the one thing we do need to talk about at some point after we talk about meals is putting a fence around perhaps additional revenues that might come in, making certain that they are available for PCB mitigation. But that conversation doesn't need to happen right now. Right now, we're focused on 100. Senator Lyons,
Okay, I will ask my question.
are you sure?
Yeah, because
Okay.
it's about PCBs.
Senator Chin,
So I'm relatively new around here, and I don't know how to conditionally support S100 if the funding is for PCBs dedicated. So when we come to the vote tomorrow, I don't know how to frame that, but I'm not ready to support S100 if I don't have in that same bill some language that is going to dedicate the money for the PCBs first. I don't know.
nope, I'm
How
not.
do we do that?
I mean, we can send out a bill that does talk about, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. St. James. I mean, we can draft anything. If we wanted to put 40 million into S100, I mean, it's not germane, but I think what people are looking for is some kind of confirmation that PCBs is not going to disappear.
Why is it not germane?
Well, S100 is a meals bill.
Well, but it's children's health.
Okay.
There you go.
It'd only be an issue if somebody challenged it.
Right.
Yeah.
And what do you do with money if you find at the end of the year that, you haven't spent the 29 million on meals? Is this what we're trying to do, to say that excess money is going to go into the PCB fund? Okay, so I like Senator Lyons' idea about this is children's health.
Okay, so Ms. St. James, if you would draft something that would make certain that $40 million from the ed fund is set aside for PCBs, put that language into S100, and then I would have to, could we get Catherine Benham, Daphne, in right now? Thanks. We're gonna ask Ms. Benham the language that we would need to put a fence around additional revenues, because I'm not sure in my conversation with her if she was talking specifically about excess revenue that's not spent on meals or additional revenue coming in. I believe she was talking about additional revenues coming in. So I want to hear from Ms. Benham on that. Senator Chinden.
You're saying revenues, and I just want to be clear. So you're talking also unspent expenses of that 29 and any additional revenues. So both unspent expenses and revenues. Okay.
And that we'll hear from Catherine Benham from Joint Fiscal, who I think will be able to help us navigate some of that.
Okay.
And I appreciate this. I think there's no question that the Senate is rightfully very concerned about PCBs and recognizes it is a huge expense and a huge health issue. You've been working on this for many, many, many years. Once we tap into this, it's gonna be expensive.
So let me remember that.
Was that, okay, you're gonna think of your question. Senator Chittenden.
Can we throw sports betting in there too?
So Beth, no. No, even Beth says no. So we know where Beth draws the line.
Because they're doing stuff, we have to like.
Yeah. Ms. St. James, we're gonna wait for Ms. Benham to join us, but how does that feel to you?
Do you want a new section that appropriates or reserves $40 million for PCB testing and mitigation efforts?
That's correct.
Okay, and then,
It's actually assessment and mitigation is the language that
Assessment.
we've heard.
okay.
Testing we put in for last year.
And this is
So-
related to Act 72, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Center lines?
I remember.
Okay.
So maybe Catherine Benham can answer the question or direct us to someone who can regarding the additional infrastructure funds that are coming to the state right now. I know it's all about roads and bridges. I think I've asked this one before, but shouldn't we look to see if there are any funds in there that could be allocated to
In where?
schools? If the infrastructure funds. from-
Yeah, there is a school part of that, but we just don't have the details on it yet.
So having so putting language in there that would put a fence around funds available for investment in PCB assessment remediation might be helpful, or capital construction. I'm trying to wrap it all up
Yeah.
before it gets consumed somewhere for an
Yeah.
athletic field.
Yeah.
I like athletic fields.
Senator Shin.
I heard assessment and remediation, since words matter, would assessment planning and remediation, just because I've seen planning to be very expensive.
The words that I've heard from DEC is assessment and mitigation. So assessment, I do believe is the planning piece of it,
Okay.
but I'm comfortable with, either assessment and mitigation, assessment / planning and mitigation. But I believe the planning piece is in assessment. Yes, so we are just waiting. Daphne, I just got a text from Catherine.
Yeah.
They're waiting for an invite. Oh, you got it, great, terrific.
Not to belabor that point,
Okay,
assessment, when you're sizing up, is that the same to you as planning once you assess? To actually then, over this time period, hiring consultants, the communications, the bonding, the architectural plans, is there a distinction for you, or is that falling in mitigation? Because I think mitigation is when you're actually spending money on the stuff, and I just know planning is really expensive.
yeah. Ms. St. James, could we say assessment, planning, and mitigation?
Theoretically, I would want to look at, I'm not familiar with Act 72 enough. I would want to look at the language used there as a guidepost, but it certainly sounds reasonable.
Yeah, I think it sounds reasonable also.
It's just because Ms. Bennett wasn't here, so I felt like filling the dead air.
It's nice to know that you sound reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay, we're just waiting for them. They're going to be here in just 2 minutes. So, so the only thing we're looking for then from Catherine is some language about assessment / planning, and also language around how to put in some guidelines, some fencing really around revenues and additional funds possibly that are not used for universal school meals. I wish there were a PCB lobbyist in this building working on these things. Yeah.
You're not
Yeah,
monitoring
sure.
your email, but Ruth Hardy has said yes and wants us to get the amendment upstairs. Is that happening?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that what she's?
Right.
I usually don't jump when Ruth sends emails, but
That's his decision.
We already talked to her.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think, I went down there and talked to her. And
Do we need to get the amendment upstairs?
we're
Daphne's
aware
running
of
it.
it.
I think she's.
So I'm just confusing the matter.
We're on top of it.
Are you working for Ruth? I was fired from that job last year. She took me out for 2 weeks. Temporary. Ms. Benham, thanks for joining us.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Oh, can you hear me okay?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, yes.
So we're looking to we're gonna put in S100 that we, the money for universal meals, we're also putting in money for PCBs, 40 million. And what we're looking for to provide Beth with is, what would the language be to fence in some money, some revenues that might be coming? That's what we're kind of looking for, language. We're not sure what revenues they might be. We're also looking to use the excess money for meals. Can you help us with some language there?
Sure, we can do it. And I'd like to, I'll work with Beth offline maybe on the details of it, but it would be something that you would say something like after fulfilling the requirements, the statutory requirements for the Ed Fund Stabilization Reserve. If there are funds, and we are doing it in the budget, we've done it in the budget, are contingently, if they're there, then they shall be used for whatever purposes you all want to use them for. So you would allocate them. So it's an appropriation in the sense that it's not a real appropriation because you have to wait for the money to come in, but it would, if that money is available, and then you could spend it on the places that you've chosen to spend it. Your budget adjustment actually did it for general fund stuff and the budget adjustment this year. So I can work with Beth on that specific language.
I appreciate that.
Can I ask my question about the additional federal funding that the state is getting for infrastructure development and repair?
Mm-hmm.
And apparently some of that money may be available for educational purposes. So how can we identify, I don't know how much it is, I don't know what the guidelines are, but how can we put some kind of fencing on at least a proportion of it to go into PCB assessment mitigation?
Oh.
Uh-oh.
Well, let me think about this because I have dealt less with the IIJA funds, but sometimes the Treasury guidance has been, the guidance
Right.
has varied a lot. So I haven't followed carefully on that. Maybe.
Can we just give direction based on the guidance that's coming? So theoretically, if we're not here and the money comes in, it may be expended by the agency, or it may be expended by JFO, a joint fiscal, not you, but the joint fiscal committee, and decisions made. So just looking for language that we can put in somehow.
So the only thing I'm going to also raise is the timeline on all of this work. Construction doesn't move fast. Like you all may be back, but having worked on the Capitol bill, I just know, things take a while, and the federal funding doesn't hit the door and go out immediately. So we can certainly talk about an intent, and maybe let me think about a way to break that up. And I just think that you all may be back before anything really is happening.
Sure.
I mean, Ms. Benham, testing is happening now, but you're right. I mean, so a few projects might start, but your point's well taken that the assessment and planning piece could take a while. I guess my one question would be, if someone were to test now and the assessment and planning is so significant, such that the seriousness of the school is so grave, could those PCB dollars go toward moving students into the equivalent of a new building, a Macy's, an empty building in a community, that kind of thing?
Are you asking about the federal dollars? Are you asking about what you're fencing?
I'm just asking what we're fencing in. And I think the answer is no, that our money is really for the assessment, planning, and mitigation, and they could be used to just get kids into a safe building. But I'm not sure.
I would need to look at the language.
That could be considered mitigation, yeah.
Yeah, what you have drafted. But I think that may be right, but it could be considered part of the process. I mean, I think it depends on how you define it. Right. I mean, we've all watched the Burlington unfold, so that's a complicated.
Very much.
Senator Persley.
Yeah, this was kind of what I was thinking earlier when we were talking about meals, and I wanted to talk about PCD's money, is that the way I thought it would work is like the $40 million would just be in a fund and would sit there until we figure out kind of, not the end of the 4 years of testing, but maybe after at least a year, and then we decide, okay, how should this money be spent? Because it seems like what we wouldn't want to do is just the first come, first serve.
Right.
Although we are prioritizing the school, so maybe it's a little bit better since they're the most important schools or the most at-risk schools with the youngest children. But you wouldn't want, I wouldn't think that we'd want to just do 100% of the funding for those first school that came in, and then try to figure out how to get funding for the next one. Seems like we'd say, okay, we know the number's going to be a big number that's needed, or we think it's going to be. Let's figure the process out before any of that money goes. But here's a down payment, since we have this money today, we're fencing it off. But I assume we won't spend any of the money, even if there's a school that's needed. We would reimburse them for those costs
Oh, I see.
later.
So they would use it, and then, yeah, if they needed to move, then we'd reimburse them something.
Yeah, once we figure out a formula, and a fair, equitable system for all schools.
Yeah.
Does that seem like something that would happen, Catherine?
Catherine?
Oh, yes. I was going to say this is very much like the school. I think that's probably the right thing to do because, if the demand is 20 million, that's much simpler. If the demand is, 80 million, then you have to figure out how you're allocating it. And if you remember in the old school funding days, the Agency of Ed would actually provide some assistance and guidance to schools and would, only would fund things that were considered appropriate for education. And they were, and they would walk through that. So there were some guidelines about what the state would help support or not support. So I think that is, that's a great point. I think you're going to also, if you've tested some schools this summer, you're going to have some people who are anxious about it. And I don't know if I haven't listened. I apologize. I haven't listened to any of the testimony. I don't know if the Secretary of Education had any thoughts about it, what was going to happen as schools get the information.
We heard from DEC on that issue, when schools are notified of PCBs, and they talked a little bit about, they're going to have to organize, they need people on the ground in the schools to educate parents, educate kids, educate faculty, etc. And they're working toward that.
And maybe it could be used, the 40 million, for the assessment. So if they get a high test result, and they have to figure out, okay, what's the mitigation plan assessment? And if they need to hire someone to do that, then maybe that's, you use some of the 40 million for that. But I don't know if it's fenced off within the Agency of Education, or is it fenced off within A&R, DEC?
I think it's fenced off for the issue itself, dealing with PCBs. That's what I'm guessing. And then whatever agency would use it.
Well, it's who administers the fund. And then that does lead into the question regarding the federal infrastructure dollars that are coming. So that money would probably fall in AOE because it is education, if it's going to be defined education. There's going to have to be a consultant for the scientific data and then an administrator for the funds to send it based on priorities. So it's going to have to be a collaborative process. I think AOE is going to.
Yeah.
Catherine, do you think of this as state setting up a special fund? That if we fence off this 40 million, it would go into a new?
I don't think you have to set up a new fund for it. I guess it's a question. You could just set it aside for the use. I do think you might want to, oh my goodness, I think if you're going to move on this next January, it might be useful to have DEC and the Agency of Education propose some kind of process, or because it sounds to me like it's really those two. Anyway, I'll let you all decide who it is, but it seems like you might want to have somebody come back with some recommendation on how to move forward. who's working on it over the summer and fall. And it sounds to me like it's a combination of those two.
Right now, it seems like if they did a test in this East Overshoe Elementary
Yeah.
School, but we need to do this, we need money for the assessment and changes to our ventilation system or replacing these lights or whatever it may be. Who has authorization to spend the money? It seems like we would need some language, because then they could be, and DC said like, well, we can do that, and AOE's are like, no, that's really, we
Yeah.
need to authorize. You don't want them fighting over it.
Yeah.
I think, I
So-
guess a question, because just to be clear, I think there is the question about how much money you would want to make available in the fall before you get back. And then there's the process about how much do you want to set up give yourselves time to think a little bit more about how you're going to allocate it. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. And I imagine it will be, a part of it depends on how many schools there are, and the testing will reveal how dire the situation is or isn't.
So to keep it somewhat simple for now, and this has been very helpful, I think what we do, and I'll look for the committee to disagree, is we set the 40 million aside in this bill. You'll provide language to Ms. St. James around additional revenues being set aside for PCBs. There will be a summer, we'll look, Ms. St. James, are you there? Great, we'll look for language in the bill that would ask DEC and AOE to come up with a program this summer as to how to distribute funds when they become needed, which should have us ready by September. I think the other piece of this, and the only other piece of this that's missing, two things. I'm wondering what the committee would say to, and I'm sure some of you received emails after the photo in Vermont Digger, to not use single-use plastics or some kind of, there's a PFAS plastics. What's that?
What's the?
There was a photo in Vermont Digger with all of these lunches in plastic.
I got an email, but.
Yeah, so so I think there's, I want to make sure that,
Biodegradable.
it's just,
Buffet style.
Wow.
yeah, I just, if for now, could you put in there, Beth, no single-use plastics? Something, I know it's broad, but you're panicking. Go ahead.
Who cannot use single-use plastics?
I think the concern is maybe what you could do is for
School
now,
cafeteria.
yeah, maybe what you could do now is put in there some language instead of broad, no single-use plastics in the cafeteria. Ask DEC and the Agency of Education to come back to the legislature in January with a plan to make certain that we are phasing out single-use plastics in school cafeterias.
Okay.
Then the final question is, this committee has been talking a little bit about calling this a 3-year pilot. And that's what I'm wondering if people are, yes.
I asked Honora what the program, what the provision 2 requires
Oh,
for
that's
4
right.
years, or?
Yeah, so are you thinking about this in terms of one full cycle of provision 2? Is that what you're thinking of?
Yes.
I assume.
So then it's 4 years, a base year, and then 3 years using the base year data. So it's a total of 4 years as a cycle
Okay,
of provision 2.
okay.
Can I,
Before that, Ms. St. James, is that clear to you?
So you would like to keep this program in session law and repeal it after 4 years? Is that what you're looking to do? To
Well,
make it a
yes.
4-year program?
Make it a 4-year program. I mean, that may change, could be as early as tomorrow afternoon or down the hall, but that's what we're talking about. Senator
Okay.
Chittenden.
I just really love the single-use plastic removal, because I think that's where a lot of the waste comments come in. And
Yeah.
if we can advocate for buffet styles so that it's not individually putting in front of kids food that they're not necessarily going to eat, I think a lot of people will get more comfortable with this plan.
Yeah, and the reason I think the study makes sense is, what if we have COVID again and we have to move towards something, and your point about biodegradable or, that sort of thing.
can I
Yes,
ask a question?
please.
Nora? So there is absolutely no way that we can use 2021 as a base year or a portion of any other year prior as a base year. We don't know.
Unfortunately, that is correct. And because the program that has been operated for the last couple of years is not the normal national school lunch program, so none of the rules apply. And sadly, federal rules require schools to declare their intention to start a base year, and so you can't go retroactively back in time. So there, next year has to be the base
first,
year for the schools that will be using Provision 2, which are the majority of schools. Again, the federal rules are very constraining on all of the good things that we are trying to do here. So.
Thank you.
Ms. St. James, I don't think there's nothing else from the committee at this point. You have any, Ms. Benham?
Yes, just to going back to, if I wanted you to finish with the plastic use. I have a question about the PCB language, but so I don't want to, if you all have more on that conversation.
No, please go ahead.
Okay. So we're putting this money aside, just to be clear, it would be sitting, nobody would have access to it. From the way I'm thinking about it, until you all come back and take action in the legislature. If you're expecting there to have the funds available this fall, we do need to create a process that would allow somebody to approve it going out. So
we need this money used this fall. I think we need to be ready to use the money this fall. Senator Persick.
Do we have time to ask DEC if they're projecting that? I know they're doing testing this fall, but
I think
I
we
don't want
should
to spend
pay
all our
for
time
testing.
on working up language on how they would be able to use it if we don't think, I mean, we could retroactively give it to the school, but I think the language.
Oh,
would
I
be
see. You were
tricky.
thinking a bit again about the reimbursement piece.
Yeah, I was-
Use it and then reimbursing. Okay.
I was thinking, like Catherine said, that we're setting aside that it wouldn't be accessible.
Got it.
Behind the fence. And then when we come back, we'll have some testing, we'll have some results.
More information.
With more information, then we could say, okay, here's the program you, DC, you, AOE are gonna run.
Yeah.
Here's how you do it.
But we would retroactively pay for testing.
Yeah, well, we
Yeah.
already
We
are.
already,
Yeah.
that was
Well, that's
last
all
year
I was
with the
trying
5 million.
Confirm it,
testing.
yeah.
Yeah.
But if a school needed to do remediation, then they would be kind of doing it in the hopes
That they would
that
be
they get
They
reimbursed.
get reimbursed. So we would not, so if you're following that, Ms. Benham, I believe Senator Pertwick's right on that those funds would not be needed. They wouldn't be needed for the fall.
okay, so when Beth is writing this language, she can just write it as a way she'll come back with the proposal and the legislature shall adopt. We can work on it, Beth.
Yeah, it'd be
that-
good if they were asked to do that.
Yeah, and we already added that to the bill.
Did we?
We did add that, correct? We said that DEC and the Agency of Education would work this summer and come back with a plan on how to allocate those dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Committee, anything else? This feels pretty good. Again, I'm sure it's going to change a million times, but please.
So I'm just thinking that within that 4-year period, there's an opportunity to adjust income, revenue source, and how to utilize the food dollars as well as the PCB dollars. So some kind of, I think there's language already in the bill on the food piece, looking for alternative funding.
Oh, right.
But maybe it's also looking for alternative programs in case this one doesn't work out. If this one's too expensive going forward, nobody's gonna want to keep it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This has to leave tomorrow. We're gonna probably even come in maybe a little bit early. So Ms. St. James, if you wouldn't mind, when you're finished writing it, if you would just email it to the committee, that would be great.
Sure. Would you like Daphne to post it before you've seen it?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you all.
Everybody okay?
Do we collectively buy a beer for all of our ledge council at the end of this?
I know, right?
Yes.
Well, we've got to do something, we'll do something for other towns.
We're,
that's
you know
for
what?
sure.
Are we still on? Oh,
We
wait.
are.
We're live.
I hate to do this, but Ms. St. James, you're our next witness.
Oh, look, that's
That's St. James. Last piece of work today, Senate tours, is S-283, which passed the House today. This was our miscellaneous education bill. We're at a spot where we need to decide whether or not we are going to concur with the proposal of amendments or do a committee of conference. Ms. St. James, if you wouldn't mind taking us through, I think the best thing to do is what did they do to the bill?
Yes. Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Counsel. I've highlighted the section headings, not the entire thing because it makes my eyes cross when I see multiple pages of yellow. But I've highlighted the section headings that are new. So the first, and they did not change anything that was in S-283 as you passed it out of committee.
Okay, so they just added.
They just added, correct. So their first edition is on page 2, section 2, line 5. It's a companion piece to the in-state tuition for refugees, which is section 1. And it is a notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, a person who qualifies for in-state tuition to the Community College of Vermont under section 1 of this act shall not be ineligible for the Vermont Incentive Grant Program solely on account of that person's residency status. So the Vermont Incentive Grant Program run through VSAC also has a 1-year residency requirement. And what this does is it says that if you have not been a resident for at least 1 year, but you qualify for in-state tuition pursuant to the amendment in section 1, then your non-1-year residency doesn't make you ineligible. So essentially, if you meet all the other eligibility requirements of the incentive grant program, not having been here for a year, if you qualify under that one exception, wouldn't kick you out of eligibility for the incentive grant program. The next addition is on page 6, section 8. And this is a timely topic, is an amendment to Act 74 from 2021, which pushes out the date for PCB testing from July 1, 2024 to July 1, 2026. And then strikes language that it is the intent of the General Assembly to develop additional guidance during the 2022 legislative session.
And is this, just for clarification, is this all schools or is this just the schools that were built prior to 1980? Or
it's schools that were constructed or renovated before 1980. And I should add, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I should add that Michael O'Grady has taken the lead on all of the PCB drafting, both before my time and then this session. So he drafted this section and the next 2. And I am going to loop him into your discussion from this afternoon in case he has any additional thoughts or anything. But yes, so this would apply to schools constructed or renovated before 1980.
So committee, this is the one area where, at least right now, that I have concerns with, but I don't know where everyone else is. Senator Perswick.
Is subsection B, is that all new language of section 8 on page 7, or is that?
Yes,
Yes.
that's all new language. Yep.
But in terms of just the date, and we can come back to it, you know, I think I've said many times that it concerns me to push this out, but we can take a committee position later. Ms. St. James, please go ahead.
So on page 7, subsection B of section 8 is all brand new language. So it requires the Agency of Natural Resources in consultation with AOE and the Commissioner of Health to submit the following information regarding PCB testing in schools that were constructed or renovated before 1980. The testing and methodology used, including where and how samples were collected, results from the testing and any immediate responses that were taken and any planned responses that will be taken, a cost estimate for the work planned to take place for the schools that were tested and any cost projections based on the sampling, a schedule for testing the remaining schools, and whether testing will occur when students and staff are present in the school, and a proposal for how any required response to the presence of PCBs in the school shall be funded, including any proposed financial assistance from the state to schools to implement a required response.
Senator Chittenden.
So I share your original concern with the extension of the date, but I feel like the page 7 content is to some extent addressing the concerns about how to do this in a thoughtful manner, prioritizing the schools that are likely to be of more concern, at least developing a schedule that considers those things. So I'm relatively okay with this because of the content on page 7. You are not?
You know, I'm still concerned. You know, we've been watching. I'm sure we've been watched and we will continue to be watched as we deliberate this issue. And I think we're setting, I could be wrong, but setting ourselves up for a number of lawsuits if we're saying, hey, you know, we'll give you 2 more years of sitting in that classroom. I feel like it's a right to know issue, but I understand your point. I'm certainly constructive. And we can come back and make a decision about this. And this might be something that we kind of just figure out in a committee conference because they may have additional information. Yeah.
And a school could do the test. We're not prohibiting school from.
Correct. Correct.
But the timeline is just open.
Yeah, for the state, for like the state's
Just testing it.
sponsored testing, this gives them all the 2 years with a report next January.
Yeah. Okay, Beth, would you continue? Section
Yeah.
9.
Section 9 on page 8.
Sorry.
I'm just thinking that, I think maybe this is one of the points that Senator Chittenden was making, is that because we'll get this report, we could change the date based on the report.
You mean next year?
Yeah, so if we say, well, what, you know, we need to speed this up or slow it down.
So would you say keep our date or keep their date?
Well, either way.
Yeah, yeah. Right, you could say keep our date, we'll get the report, then we'll do something, or
And that's what I suggested to DC, and they said, well, if the date is 2024, we're gonna start different than
I know,
2026.
yeah, I
So they
remember
didn't,
that, yeah.
they didn't really like an idea that we might change it, so maybe it's 2026 and then we see what happens. But no, I agree with you, I don't like the idea of.
2026, they're putting that for radar person too. I just. think it
yeah, Beth, want to continue?
Section 9 on page 8 is amending Act 72 from 2021. And it pushes out the date that the school inventory shall be completed. I'm sorry, that the assessment shall be completed from October 1, 2022 to October 1, 2023. And then section.
The inventory is what they completed this year.
Yeah.
That's what we got the report on.
Yeah. This is the assessment.
So this is what?
The assessment.
Yeah.
Which is more detailed.
Okay, section 10.
Section 10 also amends Act 72 of 2021, and it pushes out the date for radon testing from June 30th, 2023 to June 30th, 2026. And there was on lines 13 through 15, there was, based on the 2023 date, also a requirement that public schools or approved independent schools that are already engaged in implementing indoor air quality improvement projects prior to June 30th, 2023, shall also perform a radon measurement on or before June 30th, 2024. And since that June 30th date was pushed, the 2023 date was pushed out to 2026, that additional language at the end of that subsection was struck.
Okay.
Section 9, section 11 on page 9 is the same language from your miscellaneous, or from H716 regarding crime insurance for incorporated school districts. So they also added that.
So this passed out on H716?
It's in H716. It passed out of
Okay.
your committee.
Yeah, Senator Chittenden.
Does that indicate that they don't think 716 is gonna make the distance?
Well, maybe, or they just haven't been following along. I'm inclined to think they haven't been following along. But I could be wrong. It's good to have it in a couple spots. Yeah.
If we go to conference and there's only one of these left, do we need to do anything to make sure the Holocaust effort is germane to this?
This is a miscellaneous ed bill, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think it would be added, yeah.
Even if
Providing it's the Senate's opinion, it's the Senate's position, so 716 would have to pass.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Ms. St. James? Section 12.
Section 12 on page 9 is a piece of session law, and it allows a Vermont resident who is enrolled in an interstate school district and is on an IEP and is 21 years of age or younger. And because they are enrolled in an interstate school district, if they are not entitled to receive special education services through the interstate school district due to age limitations. So for example, if a Vermont resident is enrolled in an interstate school district and New Hampshire law applies, currently New Hampshire law only allows for the provision, it does not allow for the provision of special education services through the age of 21, like Vermont does. So if a student fitting that set of circumstances, it would allow the student to choose a Vermont public high school, provided that the school determines it has the capacity and the services to serve the ability to serve the student's IEP, in order to max out on those special education services. The money that would be used, the tuition and special education expenses for the student, would be paid by AOE, and AOE would include it in its annual budget request to the General Assembly. Do you want me to just keep going?
Just want to. Yeah, I think this sounds fine to me, looking around. Yeah, okay, please. Section 13.
Section 13 is related to section 12. It's a contingent effective date section. So there is a piece of legislation in New Hampshire right now that would extend the age through which a child would be eligible to receive special education services up through 21. So this section 13 says section 12 shall not take effect if on or before July 1, 2023, the General Court of New Hampshire enacts legislation that extends the age through which a child is eligible to receive special education services to 21 years of age. So if the New Hampshire legislature moots the issue, section 12 does not go into effect. Section 14 is an amendment to 16 VSA 160, section 166, subdivision B8. And the actual amendment is on page 11, all the way down at the bottom, starting on line 19. This is approved independent school, independent school statute. And this section addresses financial reporting events. And so the amendment is to subdivision B, and it says that if currently it's the state board that has to do that notifies the independent school that they believe it lacks the financial capacity, and then does a review of an investigation into the school's finances. And then this amendment just realigns the responsibility there and places the responsibility onto the Agency of Education instead of the state board in that situation.
Realize that's a policy decision, but do you know why they felt it was just the state secretary's office more equipped to deal with this, basically?
Yes, I think this was a request by the agency. And if you look at page 12, they have to conduct a school visit, obtain such financial documentation, et cetera. And I think it was related to capacity.
Did BOE agree, as far as you know?
I don't remember off the top of my head if there was direct testimony from them.
Okay. Pre-kindergarten qualification.
Page 13, section 15. This section amends 16 VSA 829, which is the pre-kindergarten education statute. It's specifically on page 14, lines 4 through 10, amends the pre-qualification section. And so it's keeping the, on page 14, lines 3 through 5, it keeps the requirement that in order to receive pre-qualification, one of the ways to receive pre-qualification is to have at least 4 stars in DCF STARS program, but it eliminates the requirement that the program also has a plan to get to at least 2 points in each of the 5 arenas. And then similarly, in subdivision C, lines 16 through 10, there you could be pre-qualified by keeping by having 3 stars, but it eliminates the requirement that they will achieve at least 2 points in each of the 5 arenas in no more than 3 years, and the provider has met intermediate milestones. This is a response to a request from DCF to allow more flexibility. They're redoing this, they're relooking at the STARS program. And so they're not getting rid of stars or the requirement that programs have stars, but it may know the 2 points in each of the 5 arenas may no longer be a thing based on the reworking they are doing. And so this amendment would give them the flexibility to continue to develop that program while also holding programs to standards.
So we're not taking a step to lessen quality in any way.
I think that's a policy.
It's not in the case. I'd say this, is there anything in here that has the potential to weaken quality in terms of the evaluatory processes?
The most factual way I can answer that is this is not changing the stars required in order to be pre-qualified.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not that fluent in this, and others probably are. Does anybody have any immediate questions or concerns about this? Okay, I see none.
Section 16 at the very bottom of page 14, spilling onto page 15, is another amendment to Act 72. Act 72 created, Section 7 of Act 72 created a one-time limited service position to implement the act, to help implement the act. And that was related to the school facility inventory, et cetera. That position has not been filled. And so this amendment says, in the event the required expertise is not available through position recruitment, the agency is authorized to contract for the service to implement this act. And then a small amendment on line 12 that the funds may be used to either fund the position or contract.
What was this was the position to do the help with the inventory and assessment?
Correct.
Which they did contract with somebody to help with the inventory.
It's for all of the work within Act 72. So that includes not just the inventory and assessment.
And did they give testimony that they advertised and tried and they couldn't get anybody, or?
I don't know that I was in the room for the testimony on why this is necessary, but the position has not been filled.
Yeah.
Clarification point, this goes to conference committee, is any bill that the Senate has passed, being the position of the Senate, eligible to be brought into that conference? From the education field?
No, just,
No.
no. And you can only discuss what's in the underlying bill as it was introduced or what was added on in the House and Senate. You can't put new stuff in.
So if we go to conference, do we want to just slap S219 on this as well as?
That would be a further
Holocaust.
proposal amendment.
You understand my
Like
question?
Michael did today on his.
Yeah, that's what my mind was going,
Yeah.
just trying to understand what we did this afternoon.
So yeah, we could concur with further proposal of amendment. We could concur, or we could have a committee of conference. But if we go to committee of conference, you're the expert in the room on this, then Senator Chittenden's really the question, does that allow us to just, if it's really just on this bill, there's no way we can say, hey, we passed the mascot bill. We want that, correct?
You can try to do that. And if the conference committee comes out with it and somebody challenges it on the floor. So,
Okay, so if we go to committee of conference, generally we want to work within these parameters, yeah.
One person challenge it, or is it a vote to challenge germaneness?
one person.
One person
Yeah.
can say
One
it's
person
not
and then
germane.
the secretary or the presiding
Yeah,
Madam President, one of the two
Determines
decides
whether-
germaneness. I think the
right.
presiding.
It's a germane, it's question of
Okay.
germaneness or whether it was in the underlying bill in the
Okay.
first place. And I've seen that happen.
That's really helpful.
The president would decide whether it's germane or not.
This is Molly Gray.
Molly Gray.
Yeah.
And then if you disagree with the germaneness, but I think you need like 3/5 or some really
It's a
odd,
high.
It's a big vote.
Yeah.
3/4 votes to overturn.
Just make sure everybody's in conference committee.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, this is great. This is good because I'm learning this too.
So what we did this afternoon, it seemed like we were playing a game where we put a bunch of stuff on a bill so that it's all germane to a conference committee. Is this common, and do we want to take that same tactic out?
I don't know
Well,
what
it
we can
depends on
do.
where-
We do have-
Yes, we do have something. We'll be up in about 10 minutes. I don't know if that was a model legislative
Yeah, that
process.
wasn't a
today.
model.
Fair enough.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it was.
So
So it's fine. It happens.
right, that bill was an anomaly.
Yeah, faulted the process of late, so I'm going to inquire more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In like, because the House did a weird thing by putting all that on that robocall bill.
Yeah, that was just an
Robocall.
extension of the problem.
That's not an ideal procedure either.
But the Senate just wanted to make sure that pieces that they had dealt with got into that bill as well.
So here's a question. For, let's say, better worst case scenario, we're out on Wednesday. Do we have time to concur with further proposal amendment? Or are we really talking, if we have disagreements, we go to committee of conference and start hammering this out now? So on Monday, we're kind of back in the room saying, this is where we're at.
If we wanted a committee of conference, it would start as early as just informal communication
Right,
right away.
right. I'm just wondering, so in terms of further proposal amendment, I'm wondering if we were to get out on Wednesday,
Yeah.
and I don't think we will, it might not make it, is my point. So that's where I'm thinking.
You're right.
Our options are committee of conference or concur. And given that, we have plenty of time to do one of those two things.
The House members told me today they've already been informed of the plan until next Friday. What does that sort of do?
They was done with it. I like that.
I mean, no, serious. A lot of stuff.
Yep.
Just have to stop out.
Send it out.
If Jim Ash was still here, he would call you into this office for publicly admitting talking to us. I don't see anything that I disagree with, just for the only thing I wonder about is that did the agency try to fill the position, or are they just like, hey, we're just gonna contract it out? it's more of a question than like I'm objecting to it. I just would like to know, but we could find out. I'm assuming it's, you know, even if they want a contract instead of hire somebody, maybe that's fine. It's more of a question than
So who'd be
saying,
able to answer that for us? AOE?
maybe even said Fisher, better.
What page is
This
that
is
on?
page 15, section 7.
Contract.
They just changed it from, at one point, we were trying to, at one point, AOE had staff to deal with the school, aid to school construction. They could help schools out and answer questions about.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so I think the idea was that we'd be slowly building that capacity back into the agency. This allows them to just contract. And maybe they want to, I just don't know if they tried to fill the position
I
and couldn't,
thought
or they
we-
just decided to contract.
I thought we'd heard from the agency that they've had trouble filling
could be.
positions, and
Okay,
this, I.
What
seem
is
to
this person
remember
doing? Is this related to PCBs or not?
no,
No.
No,
this is
no.
to
Oh,
the bill we passed last
Last
year.
year.
That included the stuff about inventory and the assessment. I don't know exactly all the duties of this person, but I think it was for,
Because wasn't there just like that one woman who was doing the things and then she lost some help? Didn't somebody leave?
years ago, but not recently. I think.
Not
And
recently?
this summer, they did contract with somebody to help with the inventory. But I don't know if that was because there's a contracting is easier than hiring a full-time person, but that's my only question. So other than
So you're
that,
okay with
I'm
PCB stuff? No, I know, yeah, that's just the one thing that I just
Just, oh,
can't
the date.
think.
The dates are low,
That's the
Yeah.
part that stinks for me.
no definitive timeline.
Well, it just pushes it out.
Yeah.
I could have issue with it if it's to get to a state where we can make sure the Holocaust language and other bills are important to us, see the finish line. But I don't know what that.
Well, we're,
I don't think that bill, unless you know something, I mean, you've been talking to the House. In some of those Zoom conferences in the evenings, have they said that they don't like what we've done at 716? You haven't heard that? Okay, okay,
or the mascot. No?
yeah,
I heard they were taking testimony on that today.
Yeah.
But I gotta stop.
okay. What time are you talking to them tonight? So, yeah, I mean, I don't think they're slowing anything down.
But we're running out of time.
We're just running out of time. So I've asked, Daphne's gonna have Ted Fisher in on that question tomorrow. Does anybody else have any other questions related to the bill or concerns at this point? So we'll have Ted Fisher answer that tomorrow. And then tomorrow afternoon, we can either concur or have a committee of conference. And we'll have enough time for either one of those. How does that sound to everybody?
Sounds good.
Okay, good group, okay. Yep.
He's still there.
Let's see.
House members, that's.
So I did this here on the change for the independent school investigation regarding financial capacity. That was a joint request if the state board and it from state board and AOE. So the board supports it. So that's good.
That's good.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, these guys are okay generally with the PCB piece. The four of us can think about it and then we can go from there.
I could change my mind.
Right, I'm willing to
Right, you
go,
could change your mind by
I'm willing to go along,
tonight.
I'm willing to, yeah, go on with the committee, if we think you get the house to move it back and.
Yeah,
I don't know if giving them one more year, if that's,
I know,
that's
I
kind
know.
of, if you went to conference committee, that's where you might end up, but.
right.
2026 is a long way away.
Keep
It
the
is.
24th, but with,
3 years.
With what?
we keep 2024, but with more suggested language that the report could encourage a delay of that. So pretty much what you said earlier. Stick with our original date, but acknowledge that the commission we had in January could be a time to extend that out. I know that means that they're gonna have to plan differently, but
Yeah, just think about it tonight. I mean, you're right. If we go to conference, we'd probably end up 2025. I don't think any of us are are the kind of folks that just walk away from a bill on that, something like that. But, think about it. Senator Terenzini.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, the date to me seems like it's a long time away. And I'd certainly be in favor of moving it up sooner.
Okay, so it sounds like we may be possibly heading to a committee of conference on that issue, but we'll hear more testimony tomorrow. I'll touch base with the chair of House Ed, and we'll regroup tomorrow.
Right, and maybe you'll get information from that conversation with Suffolk.
Maybe.
Or if there were a further proposal amendment and we,
Right,
Like
You know,
if they would say. hey,
and they
we
would
did
say
this,
yes,
we
then
agree
I-
to it.
right,
Good.
right. That would be enough time
That
for the
would-
proposal amendment,
Yeah.
1 year.
If they're gonna concur, you wanna get their.
if they would avoid the conference.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Come on.
Thanks, everybody.